Hey everyone, in this video I am going to be beginning my coverage of Brian Michael Bendis's Daredevil run, and I am planning on covering his entire run over the next several weeks. And I may also continue on with Ed Brubaker's run, which kind of continues on where Bendis leaves off. We shall see though. Now I wanted to cover this book because I realized I haven't covered that many Marvel books here on my channel, and this one is one of my absolute favorites. I think it is the best thing Bendis ever wrote, and it is also the best Daredevil run ever. And I've read a lot of Daredevil, and I think Bendis is peak Daredevil. So if some of you out there haven't read this run, you are in for a real treat because Bendis really revitalizes the character and does some amazing stuff with it. So in this opening volume, we're going to begin with a 4-issue arc called Wake Up, which is kind of artistic and focuses on Ben Urich. But things really start cooking when we get to the 6-issue Underboss story arc. That one brings the Kingpin into the story, and there is an assassination attempt on the Kingpin's life by some of the people within his own crew. So some infighting with the Kingpin's camp, and Daredevil gets sucked into that story, and through this opening arc here, his secret identity kind of gets revealed, setting up some massive repercussions that will be followed up throughout the course of the rest of Bendis's Daredevil run. Alright, let's dive into it now. The beginning of Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis. Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis, written by Bendis and art by Alex Maleev and David Mack. Before we dive into Brian Michael Bendis's Daredevil run, I want to give you a little background on the status quo of Daredevil at the time before Brian Michael Bendis took over. So Daredevil was first published in 1964, and it ran for 380 issues. Then in the 90s, sales started to decrease, so when the 2000s came around, Marvel decided to cancel Daredevil and reboot it with a brand new #1. And it was published under a new Marvel imprint called Marvel Knights. The writer brought in to begin this new Daredevil #1 was an unusual choice. It was filmmaker Kevin Smith, famous for such 90s movies as Clerks, Chasing Amy, and Dogma. Kevin Smith was always known as a huge comic fan, so it was a very unique choice for him to be writing the character, although he wasn't an established comics writer at the time. So the first issue of this new Daredevil #1, written by Kevin Smith, came out in November 1998. His story arc was called Guardian Devil, and the story arc lasted for 8 issues. Afterwards, Kevin Smith would be replaced by another writer. Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil storyline was honestly only okay. It involves a 15-year-old girl who gives her baby to Daredevil and claims that the baby was born without ever having sex, so the child might be the Antichrist. That little plotline doesn't really matter. One significant thing that did happen in these issues, though, is that Karen Page, who is Daredevil's on-again, off-again girlfriend, who is a character that some of you may remember from the Daredevil Netflix TV show, well, she was killed in this story arc by Bullseye. This development, the death of Karen Page, will of course have repercussions for Daredevil in the future. Karen Page apparently had an insurance policy on herself, and when she died, in her will, she left her money to Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson, and they used that money to reopen and re-establish their law practice. Post-Kevin Smith, writer David Mack took over, and he introduced a new character named Echo, aka Maya Lopez. Echo's father was apparently killed by Kingpin many years in the past, and throughout the next several issues, Echo eventually confronts the Kingpin, and she ends up blinding him. The Kingpin will eventually regain his sight, but when Brian Michael Bendis' Daredevil run begins, Kingpin is still blinded, so I wanted to at least give you all an explanation for why that is. Some of you may be familiar with the character Ben Urich, who is a reporter that works at the Daily Bugle, the same newspaper that J. Jonah Jameson runs and Peter Parker also works at. Ben Urich, during Frank Miller's Daredevil run, discovered Daredevil's identity as Matt Murdock. Despite knowing this, he keeps it a secret, and him and Matt Murdock are allies of sorts. Also, during Frank Miller's run, specifically in the Born Again storyline, Kingpin also discovered Daredevil's identity as Matt Murdock. Kingpin found out that information because Karen Page was a drug addict back then, and she sold out Daredevil's secret identity for a hit of drugs. And somehow that information worked its way up to Kingpin. Matt Murdock had since forgiven Karen Page for this. Kingpin did torment Daredevil/Matt Murdock over this information, but for now, he is kind of just sitting on it. Daredevil's secret identity is still, for now, for the most part, secret. Although there are a handful of people that do know his identity that is maybe not ideal. Why hasn't Kingpin used this information or revealed it to the world? Well, Kingpin apparently believes the enemy you know is better than the enemy you don't. That is kind of everything you need to know before Brian Michael Bendis' run begins. Alright, now that I've gotten all that Daredevil publishing and historical and character context out of the way, let's dive into Bendis' run with Daredevil issue 16, Wake Up, part 1 of 4. These first 4 issues are a little bit avant-garde. Bendis' real run really kicks off at issue 26, but for now, let's see what he's doing in these first 4 issues, where he was teamed up with artist David Mack that has a really unique style that kind of looks like painted watercolors with avant-garde kind of sketching. When the book opens up, we see reporter Ben Urich from the Daily Bugle. He is investigating a story about a little boy named Timmy Lang. Timmy's father is the D-level villain known as Leapfrog, aka Buford Lang. Recently, Leapfrog and Timmy seem to have some sort of confrontation with Daredevil, and it has left Timmy in a very agitated state. Timmy's father is nowhere to be found. Timmy is just mumbling and making up stories of various villains fighting Daredevil, and then he trails off. Timmy is almost in a catatonic state. Ben Urich doesn't seem like he's getting anywhere. He talks with Timmy's mother a bit. Timmy's mother is Allison Lang. They discuss Timmy's condition. They also discuss her husband, Buford, aka Leapfrog, and how he's missing. Timmy started acting this way ever since Leapfrog disappeared. Ben Urich asks Allison, "Do the police have any leads in finding your husband?" Allison, distraught, says, The police have made it very clear they don't care. Nobody cares. My good-for-nothing husband is missing and my little baby is not doing well. When the police found out who my husband was, I overheard them saying, well, there's one more piece of garbage we don't have to worry about. Ben Urich heads back to his office at the Daily Bugle. He finds himself really fascinated in this Leapfrog story and the effect it had on Leapfrog's son, Timmy. Urich begins typing up a story. He hands it into J. Jonah Jameson to potentially be published. When Jonah sees the story, he is furious. Jonah storms over to Ben Urich and crumples up Urich's story. He tells him, "You're supposed to be covering the trial of the Kingpin of crime, finally responsible for his actions in a court of law, and you bring me some cockamamie nonsense about some kid whining about his pappy? It's garbage. I won't print it." Ben Urich tries to defend the merits of his story. He says, "I know the Kingpin headline story, Jonah, but I was following up on an important story that..." Jonah cuts him off and says, "Important story? Frog Boy disappears and the only one upset is his kid? That's a big story?" Ben Urich corrects Jameson. "It's Leapfrog." Jameson fumes. He replies, "Leapfrog? Leapfrog? Some goofball bounces around in a frog costume? and robs banks, and I'm supposed to tell my readers they care that the guy disappeared? Ben Urich explains, Jonah, the boy is the story. This poor boy saw something that shocked him into a catatonic state. The kid has totally lost his grip on reality. I think he saw something, Jonah. I think he saw something that was too much for him, or I don't know. The cops won't help, they could care, and the mother just sits in the hospital next to him. She's scared, and she's... Beyond that, I think this is something that has to do with Daredevil, and I want to find out what. Jameson forbids Urich on working on this story any longer. He tells him to grow up and do his damn job. He doesn't want to see another story about this kid unless the kid's sleeping with Madonna or Reed Richards or both. Urich then goes on about his day. He speaks with Peter Parker. They discuss Leapfrog. Urich goes home and has a quiet dinner with his family. He then has a trippy dream at night where he's speaking with Matt Murdock in a movie theater and Elektra stabs Matt in the back. Urich jolts up out of that bad dream. He then gets a phone call. It is 6:30 in the morning. It's a nurse from the hospital. Urich goes to the hospital to speak with her. She explains that she gave Timmy some crayons so that he could draw, and he's been non-stop drawing pictures of Daredevil. Urich asks Timmy what happened. Timmy just repeats, "End of the line, mister. End of the line. End of the line, mister. End of the line." Daredevil, Volume 2, Issue 17, Wake Up, Part 2. Urich is talking to Timmy, and Timmy's wild imagination is concocting some tale between Daredevil and some masked villain. But all of a sudden, Timmy starts freaking out. He says, "Oh no, he's come back! He's come back for me! Oh God, somebody help me!" Urich asks the boy, "Who is it, Timmy? Who's come back to get you? Is it your dad? Is it Leapfrog? Is it Daredevil? Is it Daredevil, Timmy? Did Daredevil do something to you?" Timmy just freezes up again. He stares off into the distance, silent. Afterwards, Urich and the nurse talk. The nurse allows Urich to take the pictures that Timmy has drawn. Urich brings them back to his office and wonders, what does this all have to do with Daredevil? Urich then goes to the police station to talk to the detectives that handled the Leapfrog disappearance case. Right now, the detectives are in the locker room. Urich goes back to talk with them. They are not very helpful, and they clearly did not care about this case. Ben Urich asks, "I'm here about the Leapfrog case. You were the detective who took the report, right?" The detective answered, "Yeah, the wife called, we came down. I don't know what, the guy skipped out on her? No evidence of foul play, no body, no nothing. This Leapfrog was a loser, twice honored. Rumor has it he was pulling on a job that very night. Good riddance, I say. I hope he hopped right out of town." Urich asks the detective, "So you did a thorough investigation?" The detective answers, "Investigation into what? There wasn't anything to investigate. Like I said, the guy skipped out on his wife. Happens all the time. The schmuck's probably on the lam. Someone will pick him up. They always do." Urich continues his questioning. "The wife quoted you as saying, 'There's one more piece of costume garbage that we don't have to worry about.' Is that what you said?" The detective answers, "The guy dresses up like a frog and robs people? That is the textbook definition of a costume piece of garbage. Let Daredevil and Spider-Man and what's-his-face with the cape, let those leotard-wearing Nancys deal with those pinheads. We have real criminals preying on real people to deal with." Urich asks, "Did the wife mention Daredevil?" The detective answered, "Yeah, I think so. Who knows? The broad was hysterical." Urich eventually leaves the police station, not getting anywhere there. He then goes over to Nelson and Murdoch's law offices. He wants to talk to Matt, or more specifically, Daredevil, and find out what the deal with this whole situation is. When Urich asks the receptionist if Matt is in, she says, "Nah, he's in court. You want to make an appointment?" When Urich asks when is he expected back, the receptionist coldly answers, "Listen, pal, I'm just a temp, okay? I tell you he's in court, he's in court." Urich knows that Matt is probably not in court. He's probably out somewhere being Daredevil. Yurk then goes to talk to Timmy's friends at school, and he learns that Timmy likes comics and movies. The friends tell Yurk that he should go talk to a woman named Miss Andraco. She's a teacher at Timmy's school, and they're always talking and stuff. Yurk goes to the school and does talk to this teacher. She explains that Timmy's mom was most likely abusing him. She seemed to be beating him, and there were bruises on Timmy's body. Yurk goes back to the hospital and he checks on Timmy. And while Timmy is sleeping, Yurk checks his arm, and sure enough, Timmy's arms are bruised. Daredevil Issue 18, Wake Up, Part 3. Ben Urich, still at the hospital, is wondering what he should do. He eventually decides that he will report the beatings of Timmy to the police. The police later show up at Timmy's house with Urich along for the arrest, and the police take Timmy's mom into custody. While all the commotion of the arrest is going on, Urich sneaks into Timmy's bedroom. He sees all of Timmy's various comics and toys and action figures. It reminds Urich of his own childhood, and also his own strict father. Urich goes back to his office and continues typing up his story of Leapfrog and his wife abusing her son, but he gets word that J. Jonah Jameson wants to see him, most likely ask him why he's not covering the Kingpin trial. Urich doesn't want to deal with hearing Jameson yell at him, so he ducks out. He eventually decides, alright, he'll cover the trial. He goes to the court and watches some of the trial proceed. He knows this trial is a waste of time, though. The Kingpin will most likely go free. Meanwhile, a poor little abused boy like Timmy sits alone in the dark. Urich decides to leave the trial and go back to the hospital and talk to Timmy further. Timmy has been drawing all of these little cartoons on all of these various pages. On the pages, Daredevil seems to be fighting Leapfrog, Timmy's dad. Urich asks Timmy to arrange the pictures in a way to kind of make a comic out of it. With the way that Timmy seemed to arrange these pictures, it looks like Leapfrog is fighting Daredevil. Leapfrog gets the upper hand and is about to hit Daredevil with some sort of pipe, but then some sort of electric spark electrifies Leapfrog and knocks him out. Urich is not too sure what to make of all of this. As Urich leaves the hospital, he is walking home, and he sees some news on TV in a store window that apparently the Kingpin was shot. Urich thinks to himself, uh-oh, the Kingpin's been shot? This is the story of the year. Story of the year, and I wasn't there. I was supposed to be there. Urich heads back over to Matt Murdock's offices. He asks the receptionist once again if Matt is here. She says he is not. Urich is determined to speak with him, so he decides to wait outside in an alleyway, because he knows eventually Matt will show up. Urich, he ends up falling asleep in that alleyway, but eventually Daredevil does indeed show up, and he finds Urich there sleeping, and he wakes him up. This startles Urich. Daredevil asks him, "What's going on, Ben? What are you doing here? I didn't mean to scare you." Urich replies, "Leapfrog, I need to know what happened between you and Leapfrog." Daredevil Issue 19, Wake Up, Part 4. This is the conclusion of this story arc. Ben Urich demands that Daredevil tell him what actually happened in the fight between him and Leapfrog. Daredevil explains he was investigating some petty thefts that were happening around the area, and Daredevil found out it was Leapfrog when he caught him in the act of robbing a little antique store. They tussled a bit, but then Leapfrog started trying to get away. He got up on the roof and then started jumping towards other buildings. Daredevil says he easily followed him though. They eventually made their way onto this roof of a building on the Lower East Side. Leapfrog was trying to get into a fire escape door there. He started panicking when it was locked and he couldn't get through it. Daredevil caught up to him and smacked him around a bit. But then all of a sudden, the fire escape door opened. It was a child who opened the door. The child was Timmy Lang, Leapfrog's son. Daredevil did not know that, though. Daredevil was surprised when he saw the boy, so Leapfrog managed to get the jump on him and hit him in the head with the lead pipe. Leapfrog then yelled at his boy, "Get back inside, you little rat bastard! Inside, kid, now, or you're next!" Leapfrog goes for the killing blow on Daredevil. Daredevil was blacked out at the time from his previous hit in the head. Daredevil doesn't know what happened next because he was knocked out, but when he eventually woke up, he found Timmy there, but not Leapfrog. Where did Leapfrog go? Daredevil asked Timmy, "Where'd he go? Did you see? The man dressed as a frog? You see where he went?" Timmy stayed silent. Daredevil had no clue. There was no smell, no sound, no feel of Leapfrog around. Eventually the cops came and Daredevil took off. So what happened when Daredevil was blacked out for a little bit there? What happened to Leapfrog? Daredevil and Urich go to visit Timmy together. Timmy, even though he is distraught, seems happy to see Daredevil. He respects Daredevil. Daredevil takes Timmy in his arms and they go up to the roof. Daredevil has a heart-to-heart with the boy. He removes his mask and he lets Timmy touch his unmasked face. Somehow this triggers the memory of what happened with Leapfrog to Daredevil. When Daredevil was knocked out from the first hit with the lead pipe, Leapfrog was going to hit him again and finish him off and kill him. But then Timmy stepped in. He saw an electrical cable on the roof there and he picked it up. He wasn't going to let his dad kill the hero Daredevil, so Timmy used that electrical cable and connected it to his dad's belt, and it shocked Timmy's father, and it sent them both flying. Timmy's dad, Leapfrog, fell off the building. He fell off the roof and into a garbage truck that was passing by. Leapfrog's body was never found, so he was assumed missing. But it was actually Timmy that, in a way, accidentally killed his dad, trying to save Daredevil. This was a traumatic enough event for poor little Timmy that it made him catatonic. And on top of that, his mom was abusing him too, and she got arrested because of it. And Timmy now seems all alone in the world. Matt and Timmy hug, knowing that everything is now okay. In the aftermath of these events, Urich goes back to the Daily Bugle and he writes the story about Timmy and Leapfrog and their family. J. Jonah Jameson, having read Urich's story on Leapfrog, taps Urich on the head, signifying that he did good on this story. He ended up getting lucky in the end. Ben Urich also ends up taking Timmy home with him to meet his family. Timmy is going to live with Urich and his family for the foreseeable future. Timmy seems a little bit confused and nervous about everything, but in the end it seems like he's going to be happy here and have a good life. Now after issue 19, there was a 6-issue story arc called Playing to the Camera by writer Bob Gale, but that story arc does not matter. We are going to go right over to issue 26, which is when Bendis fully takes over the book and his run really begins. So here we go, Daredevil Volume 2, Issue 26, Underboss, Part 1 of 6. The book opens up in Kingpin's headquarters. We are introduced to a mobster named Sammy Silke Jr. Sammy's dad apparently went way back with the Kingpin. Sammy is talking to Kingpin in front of all of his men, and he's being a little bit disrespectful. Sammy's talking about hitmen or hired help, and how this new generation doesn't seem to take care of business themselves. Today, they hire mutant assassins and ninjas and a half-man, half-god knows what. Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, asks Sammy, "What's your point, Silk?" Sammy starts criticizing Kingpin's business practices. He says, "First off, it's expensive to hire these specialty sideshow acts. Expensive and risky. Just bad business. And secondly, if you haven't noticed by now, Kingpin, you suck at it. I mean, how many times does a guy have to have his fat behind handed to him before he gets the hint? My guess, you wanted to play dress-up since you were a kid, but you were too frickin' fat. So now, as an adult, Kingpin cuts Sammy off and says, I've tolerated your presence in this city, in my city, as a courtesy to your family and to repay an old debt. But you have done nothing to earn your keep. You have done nothing but instigate, and your presence here will no longer be tolerated. Run back home to your daddy and tell him our debt is paid. I have neither the time nor patience for this grandstanding. What the Kingpin doesn't know, though, is that Sammy has secretly been working behind the scenes for the last several weeks, turning all of Kingpin's men against him. And now, it is finally time for the double cross. Sammy asks Kingpin, how are you on your Roman history? You know Julius Caesar? No? Ah, well, that's a disappointment, because if you knew the story of Caesar, this thing I have for you now, it really would have knocked your socks off. At the end of the Shakespeare play Julius Caesar, all of Caesar's men turn on him and stab him, and that is exactly what is going to happen now. All of Kingpin's men in the room pull out knives and begin stabbing Kingpin. They stab him many times and they assume him dead. The stabbing of Kingpin has taken place in the present day. The book now is going to be jumping back and forth in time, revealing to us a little bit more of the backstory behind this confrontation and how things have led up to it. So for now, we're going to be jumping back 1 week ago. We see Matt Murdock is in court. He is presenting a case to the jury, and he is giving his closing statement. The case he's trying is about a pharmaceutical company that created a drug with a hip street name that targeted kids. And when they found out that their product didn't live up to the safety requirements needed by the FDA, the company falsified reports. Kids started dying. When parents looked for answers, the pharmaceutical company sued the families of the dead kids, sued them for slander and defamation. They accused them of letting their children die so they might get a payday out of it. Throughout the course of the trial, Matt Murdock was able to prove that the company was purposely doing wrong and trying to cover their tracks. He had them dead to rights. Matt, while he was talking to the jury, he was using his heightened abilities to read the jury. He could feel their hearts beating in their chest, and he knew they were on his side. Matt's closing words to the jury are, "Let me tell you all, I too had people taken in my own life from me, and I know that there is no money in the world that will ease that pain. But what it will do is hurt these men where it hurts most. This is a civil trial. This is how we must punish those who would seek to harm us. And now it is time for you to make them pay. These are the facts of the case, and I know that you will do what is right before the eyes of God. Thank you." The book then jumps ahead, and the trial is over, and Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson are victorious. They have just won the single largest cash award in the history of New York justice. The press are there and they're snapping Murdock and Foggy Nelson's picture. The reporters ask Murdock, "How does it feel?" Murdock answers, "Let's just say I had worse days." Another reporter asks Matt, "Hey Murdock, is the rumor true that you might run for Senate?" Matt answers, "Oh come on, you made that up." Matt and Foggy then file into the back of a car waiting to take them away. Before they leave though, a mysterious-looking man asks them, "Was it worth it?" Matt's confused by the question. Was what worth it? Matt, with his heightened senses, starts smelling battery acid in the air. He also hears a slight whining sound. The mysterious man that asks the question is actually the villain known as Nitro, aka Robert Hunter. Nitro sets off a giant explosion around him, and the car that Matt and Foggy are in goes flying in the air. Nitro walks off. Matt and Foggy Nelson are a little disoriented, but they are okay. They manage to get out of the car. Matt, after confirming that Foggy is okay, is then told by Foggy to go and get the guy that set this off. Matt changes into his Daredevil costume and then begins his search for this man that set off the explosion. As Daredevil is searching for this man, his senses are a little bit out of whack. His head is still throbbing. He does manage to pick up the scent of battery acid that he smelled earlier. This is how he can track that man down. Daredevil catches up to this Nitro man. Nitro almost expected Daredevil to show up. Daredevil punches the man in the face. Then he pulls out his baton and he is going to feed him some more hits. Daredevil is concerned that this man is going to set off another explosion, but Nitro explains that his powers take a couple of minutes to recharge. He's scared of Daredevil and doesn't want to get beat. He exclaims, "I give up, I give up!" Daredevil asks the man, "Who are you? Who sent you? Tell me or I swear to God you die right now." Daredevil Volume 2, Issue 27, Underboss, Part 2 of 6. The issue opens up on a double-page splash page of Kingpin lying on the ground, seemingly dead from his stab wounds. Sammy Silke Jr., watching on from the other side of the room, says, "And that's that." And now we jump back a week once again, back to where Daredevil is confronting this Nitro man. Before we rejoin them, though, we see two cops talking in their squad car. One of the cops is a rookie, and the other is a more senior officer. The rookie's asking about costumed vigilantes. He's saying, "Alright, hypothetically, what happens if a guy comes to us like Spider-Man? He comes to us and has that dude with the scorpion tail all rubbed up and hands him over to us. So we have the scorpion, that's good, but shouldn't we arrest Spider-Man too?" The senior officer replies, "Spider-Man? Yeah, hell yeah. That guy's always wanted for all kinds of something or other." The rookie continues his questioning, saying, Spider-Man's a bad example. I mean, my point is, how the hell do you know if the guy in a costume is the real deal or not, if he's actually a superhero or not? Let's say a guy's in a Captain America costume. How do we know he's Captain America or not? The senior officer says, "Well, wouldn't Cap have one of those Avengers security clearances, like a card with a metal strip in it or something?" The rookie continues, "Alright, well, Cap's a bad example too. I just mean, how do you know if a guy's the real deal or not?" Senior officer tells the rookie, "You'll just know. Trust me, you'll know the real deal when you see him." These two cops then get a call about a Daredevil-related disturbance, and they head off to check it out. Daredevil is still beating and interrogating Nitro, asking, "Who sent you? Who sent you to kill Matt Murdock?" That is when the two cops pull up in their squad car. The rookie gets out of the car and draws his gun, and he tells Daredevil to stop. The senior officer is a little bit embarrassed by his partner. He tells his partner to stop. Daredevil's a good guy. The rookie cop doesn't listen though, and he actually fires on Daredevil. The bullet misses as Daredevil dodges out of the way. However, the missed bullet then hits Nitro in his leg. Daredevil chastises the cops. He tells them, "Put that gun away. I won't tell you again." Daredevil lets the cops know about this Nitro man and his supposed explosive powers. And then he leaves. Once Daredevil goes, the senior officer tells the rookie, "You idiot! Shut up and listen good. Open your eyes. That man you just pulled your gun on is the only thing keeping this city from turning into a living hell on Earth." It seems like Daredevil is one of the masked vigilantes that this senior officer respects and doesn't think is worth hauling in. Later on, Daredevil goes to the hospital to visit Foggy Nelson, who is there recovering. They discuss the attempt on their life. Daredevil, now as Matt Murdock, he theorizes that the guy that was trying to kill them was a work-for-hire, a hitman. Matt also explains that the cops shot him and he's unconscious downstairs. Couldn't get any information out of him. Matt also says that The explosion apparently killed 3 people in the blast. Foggy asks if Matt's sure that the killer was specifically after him. Matt says, yeah, he yelled out my name, Foggy. He talked right to me. Foggy adds, and not Daredevil. Matt continues, that's my point. See, not that many people know about me. Foggy replies, well, the Kingpin does. I mentioned earlier in this video, the Kingpin during Frank Miller's run did find out Daredevil's identity, so he does know that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. Matt, talking with Foggy, says he doesn't think Kingpin was responsible for this. He says all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he would pull a public stunt like this? That is such an out-of-left-field move for him. It just doesn't make sense. There's been times, Foggy, where he's had me dead to rights. Why not kill me then? Why now? Why would he go after me just out of the blue? Foggy and Matt then get interrupted by Foggy's mother entering the hospital room. Matt leaves the 2 of them alone and heads off. Daredevil wants answers, and he decides to go question Kingpin in his building. Remember, this is 1 week before Kingpin's stabbing. Daredevil beats his way through some of Kingpin's men, and then he finds the man himself, and he asks about the explosion at the courthouse and what Kingpin was possibly thinking. Kingpin asks, what explosion? Daredevil, using his heightened senses that Kingpin's heart actually calmed when he spoke. Kingpin is glad to hear Daredevil's voice. He legitimately doesn't know anything about this. Daredevil listens to the heartbeats of all the men in the room. There's one he doesn't recognize, person he doesn't know. Daredevil points at the man. It is Sammy Silke Jr. Daredevil asks, who is that? I don't recognize him. Sammy Silke tells Daredevil, yeah, I'm sorry I didn't mean to stare or nothing. I just never seen a guy dressed up in his underwear like that before. Daredevil smacks Sammy with his billy club and tells Kingpin to keep his mutts on a leash. The book then jumps 3 months back. We see the first time that Sammy Silke Jr. meets Kingpin's men. They're all playing poker in a back room. Sammy comes from New Jersey, but he's going to be settling in New York and apparently taking over some territory in the city. Kingpin's men ask him, where are you setting up, Silke? Silke explained, Hell's Kitchen. Kingpin's men all begin to laugh. That's Daredevil's territory. Kingpin's men tell Sammy, good luck to you, boyo. That's devil country. Sammy can't believe their reaction. He says, oh, come on, you guys talking about that Daredevil guy? Who gives a shit about a guy in tights? All this place needs is a little organization and some elbow grease. Kingpin's men know that Sammy's dad and Kingpin go way back. They ask if Sammy knows Kingpin's son, Richard Fisk? Richard is sitting at the bar alone. He seems to be a little bit out of it in his own world. He ain't talking, but yes, Sammy and Richard Fisk do know each other from when they were kids. We jump back now to the current day. Post the Kingpin's stabbing, Ben York gets a call at the Daily Bugle. He gets a tip about a story. The Kingpin is apparently dead. Daredevil Volume 2, Issue 28, Underboss, Part 3 of 6. This issue was part of an event at Marvel Comics at the time called Nuff Said. During this event, various books were challenged to tell a story without using any words, only art. So they were entirely silent issues. I think about 24 books took part in this event, and Daredevil was one of them. So this is the silent issue of Daredevil. Matt Murdock is in his office and he goes to his desk. He finds a note. He smells it. The note is from Elektra. But Matt's blind. He can't read. No. He can apparently run his fingers over the letter and read what it says. The note from Elektra reads, Matt, there is an open bounty on your head. $500,000. I don't know who put it out or why, but If it is out there and you are now open season, try not to die. Matt, in his office by his fax machine, has a picture of Karen Page. He runs his fingers over that, and he remembers her and her death, and he thinks of Bullseye, who was responsible for killing her. Matt then finds a sword on the floor of his office. He wonders how it got there. He goes to the window and tries to sense anything he can outside. All of a sudden, a red dot laser beam is painted on his face. It's coming from a sniper across the street on the roof of another building. Matt somehow senses the sniper aiming at him, and he ducks out of the line of sight in the window. The man aiming with that sniper is a villain named Shotgun, aka J.R. Walker. He is an assassin for hire, here to collect the bounty. Matt chucks his billy club at the man, and Shotgun falls back. Matt, now in his Daredevil costume, has made his way across the street, and he jumps Shotgun and knocks him down. The gunman pulls out 2 pistols and tries to shoot Matt with those, but Matt manages to evade them. Matt then disarms the gunman of his pistols. The gunman pulls out a knife and tries to stab Daredevil, but Daredevil kicks his arm and knocks the knife away. Daredevil eventually knocks the man unconscious, and he searches his coat pocket. There, Daredevil finds a picture of Matt Murdock and the bounty instructions. Off in the distance, another Daredevil villain named Boomerang is there to try his best shot at collecting the bounty on Matt. But as soon as Boomerang sees the look that Daredevil is shooting him, he knows he does not have a chance, and Boomerang starts trying to run away. Daredevil catches up with him and tackles him to the ground. Daredevil interrogates Boomerang a bit, and he also finds the same photograph of Matt Murdock, the one that is meant to signify there is a hit on him. The police arrive and Daredevil gives Boomerang over to them. In the crowded street, Daredevil doesn't notice him, but Bullseye is there watching him. He too has the same photograph of Matt Murdock, and he too was hired to potentially kill him. Bullseye, finding it too risky with all the police around, decides to just abandon this hit and disappear into the crowd. Daredevil Volume 2, Issue 29, Underboss, Part 4. Over in Switzerland, we see the Kingpin's wife, Vanessa Fisk. She has just learned of her husband's stabbing. She immediately gets on a plane and flies to New York. Back now in the current day, Vanessa has arrived in New York. She is at the apartment of a doctor named Dr. Rogan. Dr. Rogan is the physician of the Kingpin, and the Kingpin is recovering in Dr. Rogan's home in order to lay low. Vanessa arrives at her husband's bedside. There with her is this Dr. Rogan, as well as Wilson Fisk's consigliere, Waldo Dino. Waldo Dino is Kingpin's closest and most loyal advisor. Vanessa asks Waldo, "Why am I reading in the newspaper when I get off of the plane that Kingpin is dead?" Waldo explains, "I put that out there, Vanessa, because we need time. The men that did this will come back to finish the job. If they think they didn't the first time, this was an assassination attempt." Vanessa demands to know how this happened. Waldo tells her, "Your husband gave clear instructions to never involve you in any business." Vanessa, with her husband comatose, will not take no for an answer. She says, "Who did this to my husband?" We now jump back 3 months ago to the very first meeting between Sammy Silke Jr. and the Kingpin. Sammy Silke Jr. is of course the person we know to be responsible for the assassination attempt on Kingpin that happened 3 months after this. But now we will see some of the events that led to this assassination attempt. So, the Kingpin greets Sammy Silke Jr. and Sammy Silke gives a polite greeting back. Sammy then gets on to business. Sammy talks of his father that is running the mafia over there in Chicago. Sammy's dad and the Kingpin go way back. Sammy has a request, something that Sammy's dad wants the Kingpin to take care of. Sammy explains, I do come with a request from my father. There's a lawsuit pending in a Manhattan court against a company. This company my father has this silent but controlling interest in, if you know what I mean. Seems like this lawsuit is not going to go the way we would like, and he asked if you would be so kind as to take care of the lawyer for the opposition. This guy, he's been in our faces and enough's enough. Kingpin is of course happy to do this request. He says, Mr. Dini here will make the call. Who is this man? Sammy answers, guy by the name of Murdoch. Matt Murdoch. Now, Sammy Silke Jr. has no idea that Matt Murdoch is actually Daredevil. The Kingpin, of course, does know this though, and because of the Kingpin's relationship with Daredevil, he, for whatever reason, feels like he does not want Daredevil to be killed. Kingpin does not explain himself though, he just answers Sammy Silke, no. Sammy Silke is taken aback. I'm sorry? No? Kingpin continues, no, Murdoch is not to be touched. Sammy questions, can I ask why? Kingpin just walks away. Waldo Dino steps in and tells Sammy, that will be all, Silk. Sammy, now getting angry, says, no? You saying no to me? No to us? To my father? Kingpin tells Sammy, your father can call me directly. My decision stands. Sammy replies, my father is asking you for a favor. Kingpin, he then gets in Sammy's face and says, I suggest you quickly learn to mind your place. You are here as a courtesy to an old friend. Remember that. Life isn't full of second chances. It is a rare thing to find yourself with the one you've been given here, because if you plan on making a mess of things here like you did in Chicago, I think you will find that patience and understanding are not personality traits your father and I share. And if I say no one touches the lawyer, no one touches the lawyer. We now jump forward 2 days before the Kingpin's assassination attempt. But 5 days after the assassination attempt started to begin on Matt Murdoch himself. Daredevil is in a rough part of town. He's in a bar. He's beating up some patrons, trying to get some answers. He's asking about the price on Matt Murdoch's head. Eventually, Daredevil finds a patron that seems to know some information. Daredevil takes the man outside. He starts roughing him up, and the man eventually admits, Okay, the Kingpin put a price on Matt Murdoch's head, but doesn't want anyone to know it's him. It's a third-party thing through a guy to get a guy, and now it's open season. Daredevil decides to pay another visit to Kingpin at Kingpin's home. Daredevil manages to enter the Kingpin's bedroom with nobody noticing. Daredevil then begins to speak. He startles the Kingpin. Daredevil asks Kingpin, You told me you didn't have a bounty on my head, and now I found out that you do. Kingpin answers, I tell you again, I do not. Daredevil continues, Well then I guess one of your men is speaking for you without your say. Kingpin replies, Impossible, Kingpin pauses and thinks. One of his men is using his name to put out a hit on Matt Murdoch, and he knows nothing about it? Kingpin realizes he is beginning to lose some power. Daredevil realizes the same thing too. Kingpin is not as untouchable as he thinks he is. Daredevil takes off and says, Goodbye, Wilson. Kingpin tries to ask Daredevil, Maybe we can help each other once again. Hello? But Daredevil has already gone. We now jump back 2 months. Sammy Silke Jr. is hanging out with Kingpin's men. They're playing poker. Even though it's been 1 month since the Kingpin rejected Sammy's ask for him to kill Matt Murdoch for him, Sammy still has a hard time getting over this. He starts asking Kingpin's men when they're playing poker, Hey, let me ask you guys something. My dad's still up my nose about this. When I first got here, I asked the big man to bump Matt Murdoch off, and he got all in my face about it. Any of yous know anything about this blind lawyer? A silence falls across the room. Sammy continues, "What? Come on." One of Kingpin's men says, "Drop it." Another adds, "Yeah, man, you better drop it." Sammy, confused about this, asks, "Drop what?" Kingpin's men tell him, "The lawyer, leave it alone." Sammy, still utterly confused, replies, "Man, you guys a bunch of cryptic mofos." Richard Fisk, the son of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, is there, drinking alone at the bar. He calls over to Sammy and says, "Hey Silk, come have a drink with me." Sammy, a little surprised by this, says, Well, what the hell? I thought Kingpin Jr. wasn't talking to me." Their relationship was a little bit strained ever since Sammy showed up here, but he accepts Richard Fisk's offer. He goes over to drink with the man. We jump back now to the current day, to the comatose Kingpin. Vanessa Fisk is talking to Waldo Dino. She asks him, "These men who did this to my husband, was my son among them?" Vanessa Fisk clearly believes her son is responsible for this attempt on her husband's life. Daredevil Volume 2, Issue 30, Underboss, Part 5. In the present day, Daredevil goes to the roof of the Daily Bugle, and he talks to reporter Ben Urich. Daredevil asks if the Kingpin is really dead. Ben Urich answers, "Maybe." Daredevil says he was just at Fisk's office tower. The place was completely empty, not even a cleaning lady, and there was blood on the floor. Ben Urich says that the Kingpin should have seen this hit coming. He explains every time in the history of organized crime, every time the big boss of a crime family shows any kind of weakness, any kind, someone bumps him off, zaboom, every time. Daredevil asks, "Well, what weakness does the Kingpin have?" Ben Urich answers, "Well, he's blind now." Remember I mentioned earlier that Kingpin is blind now because he was attacked by this woman named Echo. Ben Urich goes on, "Listen, not everyone in the world turns that handicap of yours into a plus. You know, like you were able to." Urich then starts to speculate. He says, "Look, if it was me, and I was trying to get the word out that I was taking the Kingpin's territory, and that I wasn't a man to be trifled with, well, not only would I take out the Kingpin, I would take out you, too." Daredevil asks, "But the hit isn't out on Daredevil, it's on Matt Murdock." Daredevil pauses, and then he asks, "You think someone knows who I am?" Ben Urich then kind of joking answers, "You mean somebody else? Other than me, and the Kingpin, and Foggy, and Karen, and Spider-Man, and Elektra, and every girl you've ever made goo-goo eyes at?" Daredevil responds, "Okay, point taken." Ben Urich continues, "Listen, Matt, my whole career as a reporter is based on one simple principle. People talk. Maybe the cat's out of the bag." We now jump back 2 months ago, back to when Sammy Silke was drinking at a bar with Richard Fisk, the Kingpin's son. Sammy Silke kept asking, why was Kingpin forbidding the murder of Matt Murdock? Finally, Richard Fisk told him that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. Sammy Silke is shocked. "Matt Murdock's Daredevil? What?" Richard tells Sammy to sit down. Kingpin's men are still at the poker table playing poker. They are not surprised by this information that Richard is telling Sammy. It seems like they all already knew it. It was a well-known secret, it seems. They just kept quiet. Kingpin didn't want Daredevil killed. Who were they to do otherwise? Sammy continues talking to Richard. He can't believe it. He questions, "But Matt's blind." Richard answers, "Maybe he's blind. Maybe he fakes it. Who knows? Maybe he pretends he's blind so people don't put two and two together. Or, and this is a big maybe, maybe he's blind and has some kind of super-duper powers to make up for it. We live in a strange world with some spectacular shit in it." Sammy still can't believe this. He says, "You're telling me that this guy, this blind lawyer, is the same guy that has been costing this organization millions and millions of dollars? The same guy? And Kingpin knows it? And the Kingpin knows who he is? And you all know it too? And he's still alive?" Kingpin's men playing poker in the room are just ignoring this conversation. Richard tells Sammy, "They're good soldiers, Sammy. They're not going to even acknowledge you on this particular subject. Daredevil is not their business, and it's not your business, but you asked why my father won't let you near Murdoch, and now you know. If my father says he lives, he lives. Nobody's even supposed to know. They just kind of, found out office chatter like this. But my father, he doesn't know they know, and he doesn't know they know he knows." Sammy replies, "Does this strike anyone else as vaguely insane? Do you know what my dad would do? What the other families would do if they found this out?" At that moment, Kingpin walks in the room. Sammy shuts up. Kingpin walks through the room. Waldo Dino tells the men, "Okay, gentlemen, party's over. There's no meeting today after all. You'll get a call on a reschedule." The men are kind of upset. They've been waiting for hours for this meeting. Once Kingpin leaves, Richard Fisk and Sammy Silke talk some more. Sammy asks Richard, "Why did you tell me this?" Richard, he's upset with his dad that his dad is in charge, but he can't lead a revolt on his own. He tells Sammy, "Sam, they won't listen to me. They won't follow me. I've tried, but they'll listen to you." 1 month after that of Sammy and Richard conspiring, Sammy finally decides to talk to Kingpin's men, see if they will turn on his boss. Kingpin's men are skeptical, but they're curious. They ask, "Alright, so hypothetically, if we put him in the ground, then who's in charge?" Hypothetically. Sammy explains he would be in charge. Kingpin's men find that a little funny at first. Sammy responds, "Hey, why not me? I'm family, I'm connected. I have a sit-down with my father and we merge my family and my father's businesses and this family in New Jersey and New York in one big family, like the 50s. Kingpin's men are still skeptical. Sammy adds, "And I knock 6 points off each of your cuts." Whoa, all of a sudden Kingpin's men are listening. 6 points! Sammy tells them, "You heard me. How much you paying into Kingpin? 60%? 70%? In Chicago and Jersey? We laugh at you guys. He's stealing from you. He's taking food off your table." Kingpin's men start doing the math. What are we talking about a year? 600,000? 700,000? A year? A piece? Wait, why would you do that? Sammy answers, "'Cause it's good business. It's how it's done. The only one who doesn't do it like this is the Kingpin because he could. But you know what? His days has long since passed. You guys just haven't figured it out yet. You guys have been smacked around by that tubby load for so long, you don't even know which way is up no more." Eventually, Kingpin's men come around on the deal, and they are going to throw in with Sammy Silke and take out the Kingpin. The first step in this process is putting out word on the street, word that the Kingpin era is over. Sammy's way of sending this message to the street is that him and Richard go over to see a guy named Falzone. Falzone is a talent broker. When you want to put a hit on someone, you talk to him and he connects you to the right talent. Sammy and Richard tell this Falzone that there was a bounty out on Matt Murdock, and it's been authorized by the Kingpin. Back now in the current day, Vanessa and Waldo Dino and the Kingpin are at a private airfield in New York. They are putting the Kingpin on a plane and getting him out of the country, sending him over to Europe, to Switzerland. Vanessa is going to stay behind, though. She says that this nightmare has to be answered for. Daredevil, issue 31, Underboss part 6 of 6, the conclusion of this story arc. This issue begins with a flashback to a day after the Kingpin was stabbed. We see Sammy Silke Jr., Richard Fisk, and their other co-conspirators all celebrating when the newspaper reports that the Kingpin is dead. Now, of course, we know now that the Kingpin did not actually die, but Sammy Silke and his co-conspirators did not know that at the time, and they were cheersing drinks and partying it up. Sammy throws his arms around Richard Fisk and tells him, Richard, you did it, huh? You killed the beast." Richard, a little drunk from all the drinks, says, "He's dead. He's really dead." Sammy tells Richard, "Yes, he is. And you were the glue that held the plan together. You're gonna look back at this day and say, the day was the day I became a man." We jump again closer to the present, but yesterday. Daredevil and Ben Urich are investigating the picture that Boomerang had of Matt Murdock for the bounty he was hired for. Daredevil can smell pool chalk on the paper. Ben Urich tells Daredevil that there is a talent broker named Falzone who happens to have a billiards club, so they suspect that maybe he was the one that was involved setting up this hit. Urich goes upstairs to his office to find out more about this Falzone. 3 hours later, Daredevil is at this Falzone's place. Falzone runs a billiards and pub. Daredevil looks around and sees the place is empty, although it's odd. The place isn't closed. It looks like it was quickly abandoned. Daredevil, he goes into a back room and he finds Falzone dead, shot right through his head. Daredevil inspects the table. He finds the Matt Murdock bounty picture that all of the hitmen had. Falzone was definitely the guy that set up the hit on him. Daredevil inspects Falzone's body. He finds a .22 caliber gun. It's a small gun, a gun that a girl would use. Falzone was shot at close range. Daredevil, he tries to pick up various smells in the room. He smells beef, gyro sauce, patchouli oil, mink. Mink and patchouli oil? Wait. Daredevil, he recognizes this scent. Vanessa Fisk was here. She personally got some revenge on this Falzone. Elsewhere across town, at Richard Fisk's home. Richard arrives home for the night. It is dark. He turns on the light, and his mother, Vanessa Fisk, is there. She was waiting for him. Vanessa Fisk knows her son must have been responsible for her husband's attempted murder. Vanessa asks her son, "What did you do, Richard?" Richard replies, I saved us. Don't you see that? Don't you see? He's gone. And now finally, our lives can begin. Our lives. He was a monster." Vanessa replies, "He was a man of conviction, ambition, and for all of Wilson's faults, at least he was man enough to stand behind the ones he loved and earn his place in the world, while you are a sniveling, deceitful coward. You stand there and you look at me as if I am to thank you for what you've done. When I was pregnant, I took out one of my sewing needles and I pressed it against my belly, so scared of bringing a baby into this world of violence. If only I had the courage and strength then, I would have been spared the endless disappointment that you are now." Vanessa is clearly not at all impressed with her son. She pulls out a gun. Richard starts crying. It appears like Vanessa is going to kill her boy. Later on, once Vanessa leaves Richard's apartment, Waldo Dino is waiting for her outside. Waldo is the Kingpin's consigliere. He asks how Vanessa is doing. She says she is fine. Waldo tells her everything is in place. Vanessa gives an order. She says, "Then do it." Waldo warns her, "It's not too late to stop this." Vanessa affirmative answers, "Do it. All of them." Waldo gets on a phone and says, "The order is given." All of the Kingpin's men, the ones that turned on him and allied with Sammy Silke Jr. and Richard Fisk, they all get methodically assassinated that night. Like in The Godfather when Michael's at the baptism and they're killing all of his enemies, that's exactly what this is. The last conspirator that needs to be killed this night is Sammy Silke Jr. Sammy is heading to his apartment with a hooker he picked up. As they reach the door of his place, gunshots erupt from inside. The bullets go into the hooker. Sammy dives out of the way. He starts running. The hitmen are shooting at him. Sammy, he runs in his apartment and turns the corner. He gets over to the elevator. He gets inside. He presses the closed door button. The hitmen are firing at him. Sammy manages to evade the bullets. The elevator goes down to the ground floor. Sammy, he starts running. He runs. He finds a payphone. He phones his dad. He tells his father, "Dad, I'm coming home. I think I've made a big mistake." Sammy's dad wants to hear none of this. He will not be saving his son. Sammy pleads with his dad. "This wasn't like before. This was for the business. Dad, what are you saying? No, this was for the business. This was about you. Don't hang up. Listen to me." Sammy's dad hangs up on him. Across town, Vanessa Fisk sits at her husband's desk in his office, reflecting on what she did this night. Back over to Sammy Silke Jr., unsure of what to do. He can't run, he can't turn to his dad. Out of options, he decides to turn himself into the FBI. He's talking to 2 FBI agents. One is named Harold Driver, and the other is a Henry Dobbs. Sammy, desperate, asks, "I want to come in." The FBI asks him, "Come in from where?" Sammy answers, "I want protection, whatever you call it. I need to disappear tonight or I'm dead. Tonight." The FBI agents, they don't care. They tell Sammy, "You just confessed to murder, extortion, and drug trafficking. I can honestly say, I don't care if you live or die. But the only kind of protection you're getting is in jail." Sammy says, No, man. Jail won't work. I'll get shivved in a holding cell." Harold the driver tells Sammy, "Again I say, boo-hoo. You gotta give us something big if you want protection. You give us everything. You give us your father. Give us a detailed examination of his entire organization. Then we're maybe talking." Sammy says he can't do that. The FBI agents begin to walk out. They're not gonna deal with him then. Sammy tells them, No. I got something. It's big. Daredevil. The FBI agents ask, "Yeah, what about him?" Sammy continues, "He's really the blind lawyer. You seen him on TV? He's a blind lawyer named Matt Murdock." And with Matt Murdock's secret onto the bag, we now end part 1 of my Brian Michael Bendis Daredevil coverage. Alright, so that was the 2 opening story arcs of Brian Michael Bendis' Daredevil run. The first story arc, Wake Up, with artist David Mack, was pretty interesting. David Mack, with his painted art style, was very intriguing, although maybe not my favorite artwork. Too avant-garde for me, personally. Although the actual story was pretty compelling, with Ben Urich investigating this story of this kid and his dad, Leapfrog, and through the twists and turns of that story, we find out that this kid accidentally killed his dad, and Ben Urich is going to take this kid in. You know, it was a very artistic, touching story. Yeah, and I thought it was good. Although I would have preferred if Bendis' run kicked off with more of a bang that we get in the Underboss story arc. Now, the Underboss story arc, I think, was very good. And the artwork by Alex Maleev is more something I'm into artwork-wise. The actual storyline I thought was very compelling, with the Kingpin and his crew, and we see some of this infighting here, and there's some mystery in how it gets revealed about how these people conspired to take the Kingpin down, and I thought all that was really great stuff. And Daredevil's secret identity being part of the storyline, and it kind of gets revealed to the FBI at the end here, was intriguing. Sammy Silke, and just the mobsters and some of their interactions was great. Bendis, he writes some really good street-level stuff, mafia stuff, and we have a lot of that here. And I love the last issue in this story arc where Sammy Silke, he starts freaking out because everyone's dying around him, and Vanessa Fisk is taking all these people out, and he ends up going to the FBI and spilling as much as he can and gives up Daredevil's identity to them. So I thought all that was really compelling stuff. I thought this was a great opening story arc, and really sets a lot of stuff up to be followed up in subsequent issues. So yeah, great stuff. I'm going to give this opening volume an 8.5 out of 10. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back next week with part 2.